Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, the show that gives you a virtual seat at the bar for the real conversations that happen between entrepreneurs. I'm interviewing all kinds of business owners, from those just a few years into freelancing to CEOs helming 9-figure companies. If you've ever worried that everyone else just seems to get it and you're missing something or messing things up, this show is for you. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and let's get to it. Hey, and welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. With me today is my new friend, Chris M. King. Say hi.
So good to see you. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited about this one because you signed into the Zoom room as Chris M. King, Executive Witch Doctor, and now I must know more.
Well, that's something that a client had said to me, because the work that we do and the way that we do it, it really transcends the regular kind of business and personal coaching and consulting. And so he said, "You're not a coach." And I said, "Well, what am I?" And he said, "You're some kind of witch doctor, voodoo medicine man thing." And I'm like, "All right, that's cool. I'll buy a hat." And I did. So.
Oh my God, you actually have a hat?
I have a witch doctor hat, you gotta have that. So.
This is fantastic. Okay, so for anybody not watching the video, it's a literal top hat with like a peacock feather. Oh,
right.
Fantastic.
Got the skulls and bones on it and everything. Yeah, had to do it.
This makes me so happy. Well, how did you get into this line of work? How do you help people?
Well, I got into it. There's a low barrier to entry, really. That's how that just. No, I was really good at it. I'd kind of been doing this, all my life in some way, shape, or form. I had this moment in my life where in the span of about a week, I lost my job, my girlfriend, and my apartment. And so I was like destitute here and living out of my car. And my options were go to work for this guy who was offering me a job to become a commercial real estate broker, or be broke and hungry and try and build a company out of the trunk of my car. And so I opted for the latter, and here we are today.
What led you to go for the broke, hungry, build a business out of the trunk of my car versus the quote unquote stable option?
Well, the problem with the safe route is that I knew where it was going to end me at some point, right? 2-3 years down the road, there I am, making good money. I've created a lifestyle that I'm now required to support with this job that I don't love. It's fine, but it's not something that lights me up and really kind of sets my soul on fire. And so, and I don't do well with bored. I'm a high sensation person, thanks to my lovingly dysfunctional childhood. But bored is the worst thing I can possibly be. And so I decided I couldn't end up in jail again, the proverbial jail of the boring, safe, conventional life. It just wasn't going to work for me.
Yes. I understand that feeling very, very well. I had a job running the marketing team for a very high-powered internet marketer. Think like Tony Robbins, but for the business space. And when I left that team, we loved each other. I was leaving on top of my game, and we actually kept consulting for several months. They were trying to lure me back. And I just went, I've got to leave for my own sake, for everybody's sake. And when they asked me why, I said something kind of similar, I feel like I've done all I can in this role. And if I stay, I'm probably going to slip into coasting mode, and that's not going to serve anybody. And we're going to wind up hating each other. And that is not the way I want to leave this relationship. Let's leave while we still love each other. And then that way we can probably find exciting ways to work together in the future.
Right. It's like a moral imperative.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is fascinating. And okay, so you started the business out of the trunk of your car. What was that process like?
It was really interesting. I was doing one of the ride share things, a couple of those to string together enough money, and I was in this professional networking group, and so there were a lot of professional service providers, lawyers and accountants and insurance professionals and IT professionals, as business coaches, consultants, and business managers, and all these pretty high level people. And I was terrified that one of these days I'm going to get, the call on the app or whatever to pick somebody up, and it's going to be somebody in the network.
Oh, man.
Right. And so, so that was a little terrifying, but it's when in my experience, if I'm really on a mission for something that really means something to me, I have to be willing to do what is required to make that happen. And if
Mm-hmm.
I'm not willing to do what's required, then it's not really a goal, it's a preference. And that's okay, but I need to know the difference between those things. This was an absolute mission. And, as my father has said about me, when Christopher puts the dagger between the teeth, and he calls me Christopher, he's the only one on this planet. Please don't go there.
Your mom
Love
calls
Dad,
me Angela. I get
right?
it.
Love Dad, but no. But he says when Christopher puts the dagger between the teeth, it's going to happen. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a history of creating seemingly impossible realities. And there's a science to it. So once I learned the science to it, I figure, well, if I did it for me, I can do it for others.
Oh, I love that. Man, written so many notes. I'm like trying to pick a direction to go on the fly.
Pick the rabbit hole you like.
I know. Okay, so I'll share my homeless story because or unhoused story. When I became a copywriter, I had moved in with some good friends in the San Francisco Bay Area, which at the time was the second most or most expensive metro in the U.S. It's still pretty high up there. But they had to move apartments. I couldn't afford to go with them. So now I am without housing. And my parents, lovely, lovely human beings that they are, said, hey, come back to Texas. We'll take care of you. You can rebuild. You can get your old job at the diner. And something in my soul said, nope, nope,
Right.
nope. I would rather live in my car with my diabetic cat and figure this out because something in my soul says, stay here. I don't know what's next, but stay here. So I did. I trusted that. And man, it was rough because for those first couple weeks, I'm taking all of my meetings out of Starbucks. I went to a no-tell motel for like $30 a night, which you definitely can't even find anymore. And this place smelled, it was like a 10 by 10 room with a Murphy bed. It smelled like somebody, the only cleaning they had done for the last 30 years was walk in, sprinkle some carpet powder and walk out.
Oof.
It was horrible. I managed like 2 nights there, but like I'm showering there, running to Starbucks, conducting my client meeting, closing business, getting a check, sitting in my car sobbing.
Right.
I was
That's the path.
put on the happy face, make shit happen, go melt down later. So I definitely understand what you're talking about.
Right.
And like for everybody listening, I'm not saying that everybody needs an unhoused story, crying in your car story in order to make it. But I really loved what you said about, is this a mission or just a preference? I think that's important to know. Like, what are you willing to do to make this happen?
Well, and you also need to understand what is within your human systems tolerances, right? I refer to human beings as human systems, right? These integrated systems, mind, body, spirit. And different systems have different tolerances. So somebody said, and I get this question as I was, Chris, why didn't you take the real estate gig and build the coaching practice as like a side hustle? I said, because I don't work that way. My system needs a certain amount of heat to mobilize. Like, this company is like cooking a meal. And if I'm going to cook the meal, I need the oven at the right temperature to make that happen. And if I had some cushy thing that I was doing, or if I was hustling somewhere else, there just wasn't going to be enough heat to cook this meal and generate it. Now, other people, they would take the regular gig and then build this on the side because the idea of living out of their car and not knowing if they're going to eat tomorrow is too stressful. It's outside their system's tolerances. And so, yes, there is what is required to make this happen and what is within my tolerances. So you got to marry those two things. What can I do that needs to be done? And how do I balance this all out?
I love that because I think my biggest frustration with a lot of business coaching out there has been this tendency to go toward one size fits all. And I have definitely been in those programs where they're like, Angie, just do it this way. Just trust the process. I can see around this corner. You just need to do it my way. And to a certain extent, I go, yes, cool. If this is outside my realm of experience, at some point, I need to trust the mentors that I have chosen to guide me and try stuff out. But even if I've tried stuff out to the best of my ability, I've given it my all, not just half-assing it, right? And it doesn't make any sense to me. Well, then I got to trust my own gut and my own system and my own intuition and create something for me. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. Well, and you need to know the difference between coaches and consultants, right? Consultants have answers. Coaches have questions.
Yes.
And so and that's really, the very simple way to put it. But I think we sort of look at this get a mentor thing as almost the way we might tell young women back in the day, like, you need to find Prince Charming. It's like this kind of rescue thing. It's like, this is not going to save you. No, a mentor is sort of like brewing your own coffee. There are some basic guidelines, but really ultimately do what you like and what your intuition, especially if you're building your thing, nobody's done your thing through you ever before. So you do have a magic in there. And that's where coaching comes in. You know, consulting is great when you need answers. Coaching is when you need to access what you don't know you actually know.
Yes. Oh, I love that distinction because we all have been studying. If you've been in entrepreneurship for any amount of time, even if you're brand new at this, you've probably been reading books, listening to podcasts, trying to get familiar so you don't feel like you're floundering, just trying shit, right? There's a lot of noise out there. And how do you get clear?
There's a ton of noise out there.
How do you understand what you really want, what makes the most sense to you? And then, like, my favorite part of it is people kind of pushing you towards certain business models, right? And there's, you know, kind of an economic wisdom in there, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. And also, nobody invented like Apple computers because they were trying to follow what people did before. You know what I mean?
True. Right. Are you trying to do something that's never been done before? Are you doing your own thing? Like there's no one answer for this. You know, I mean, like, I'll use consultants. You know, I joke about this. I'm a classic entrepreneur. I have no business running my own business. You know, that's just, what do I need? I need to file a what? Like, I got lawyers, got whatever. Like, there are definitely places where this is, number one, nothing that I have any kind of acumen in. And number two, I don't care. Actually, I'm more of a CEO and much less of a president, right? My operations person, Ashley, she's almost the president, really. The CEO is the visionary and in charge of the direction. The president is in charge of the day-to-day, make it happen. And so I have no business, you know, being in charge of the day-to-day.
I think most of us feel like that on a daily basis. What have I even built here?
I mean, I have yet to meet the successful entrepreneur that says, oh yeah, I knew exactly what I was doing the whole time. Like, no, every one of them that I talk is like, I had no idea what I was doing.
I need an adult. I need an adultier adult, somebody who can tell me what I'm doing right and wrong. But I think that's been like the biggest mindfuck of this entire journey. It's like, there's not really any right or wrong. There's what's working and what's not working. And you kind of have to figure that out by trial and error.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay. All right. So you don't do well with bored. So you built this business out of the trunk of the car, right? What was that process like? Wait, I know I told you getting a check and crying in the behind the steering wheel there, but like, did you have one client that kind of pulled you out of it? Was it like fits and starts? I'm curious.
This business runs on magic, and so it's really kind of interesting. So there were a few things that had to happen. Number one, if in order to be a good messenger, you have to live the message. And my first, what I would call quote unquote real client, was this guy he was at an international wealth management organization. He was making more money by the minute than I was going to see in a month, right? And there I am sitting across from his big desk telling him how, of course, I can help you and your team and you know, really kick ass. And all the while, I've got this beat car outside with a side view mirror that's held on by duct tape, windshield wipers that were strapped on there with zip ties and a broken tail light, like, you know, and all I could think is, dear God, I hope this guy doesn't walk me out to the car, right? But the thing was that there was a deep knowing, like, I knew I was good at this and I knew I could do this and I knew I could crush it for him. And he hired me and I did, to the point where now 10 years later, he actually called me about 4 months ago, wanted my feedback on something. And so there was that. And the phone call from him came in when I was walking into, I don't remember what, I was walking into a store for something. I had $3 in my pocket and this homeless person approached me and asked me for money. And my first thought was, are you kidding me right now? I'm broke as shit. No. But, and she was telling me this whole story that was clearly bullshit, right? I can read that kind of thing. But what happened was, in that moment, I realized the reason I'm not giving her money is because I'm in contraction and scarcity mindset. It wasn't because she was full of shit and I knew it. So in that moment, I was like, all right, give her $1. And of course she asked me for more. And it was like what I was sort of communicating. I'm going to be a little woo here. I was like communicating to the universe, I'm going to let go of my scarcity mindset, and gave her $1. And then she asked me for more, as if the universe itself was saying, are you sure?
Yeah.
So I gave her $3, and now I got no cash in my pocket. And about half hour later, the phone rang, and that guy hired me.
Oh, isn't it so weird how the universe kind of tests your faith like that?
It
And I'm not
absolutely will.
It's like, I'm not necessarily talking about faith in a religious sense, but I'm talking like faith in yourself, faith in your direction, that inner knowing that you mentioned, which I think is so great. Something similar actually happened to me when I made that decision to live out of my car. The day that I lost the apartment, literally, I am handing the keys to the leasing agent. We are just completing the walkthrough, and I got the call with the offer for my first part-time copywriting job. And that was the thing that saved me. I only had to live out of my car for a couple of weeks and try to get those clients to pay the bills in between when I got my first paycheck in that moment. So, but it was minutes. I mean, minutes. I'm handing the keys over, and I just couldn't help but think after the fact that if I had been in that moment on the road back to Texas because I was scared, I wouldn't have been able to take that job. That just like, One important question, super important, highly important. Did you ever wind up picking up one of your networking buddies?
Fortunately, I did not. That never happened.
Oh man, that's so crazy.
I did tell a bunch of them about it later. I mean, I've been very, open and shameless about my history at this point,
Yeah, well, and that's part of the impetus behind the show too, is like I hid a lot of this. I remember one of my first big business conferences, I actually wrote an Indiegogo campaign to fund my way there. And I was so ashamed of that. Like, I wasn't successful enough to afford it on my own without doing this campaign. And let me be clear. I wrote haikus for people for $5, and I sang on stage with my band for $20. If like everything I could possibly do in this campaign to raise money. And when I got there, I'm just like posturing. Yeah, look at me. I made it. I'm here. I'm fantastic. I'm just here to soak up some knowledge. I remember following one of the speakers that I thought was really cool to the bar that night, like getting to the bar before they did, asking the bartender, can you make me a tall water in an actual glass with a twist of lime, please? I got a $5 with your name on it. No, I don't need any booze. I can't afford any booze. That's what I want. Like, I remember like that pressure to maintain the image and not show that basically I had no idea what I was doing was very, very strong in my early days.
Yeah, the thing in my experience, and I see this with clients today, and I'll tell them, the thing that you're ashamed of right now is going to be the catapult later. Like, it's going to be a huge asset to you, right? So if you can change your relationship to this, like, I had the same thing. I had to push through the imposter syndrome stuff because, like I said, that first client's like, I'm going to help this guy? Yes, I am.
Yep.
It wasn't a fake it till you make it thing. And, fake it till you make it doesn't really work for me because it sets off my like affirmation, same thing, kind of sets off my internal bullshit detector, But when there's an embodied knowing, that's when it happens. That's when I'm, adjusted my own frequency to match the frequency of the thing I want. And it's going to happen. Like it's just going to happen.
I love that. Like, I've had to train myself on that to look for evidence because I think the way that I grew up, whether it's a product of the local culture that I lived in or whatever, but I grew up with this idea of like, you have to prove yourself. And I think more I had to prove it to myself because I was always discounting everything I had done and then comparing myself to everybody around me as like not good enough. Look at that person. I'm clearly not good enough. Look at that business. I'm clearly not good enough. So I literally now have, I'm looking at it in a file behind our Zoom window, a file that I call the Kick-Ass Confidence Booster. And that is where I have a screenshot of like every win I've ever got in marketing, every unsolicited compliment I've gotten, feedback from the podcast. I keep all of that there just to help me bolster that inner faith, that knowing that like I can figure this out. Look at all these wins I've got. Look at this long track record. I totally agree with you on the fake it till you make it. I cannot stand that bullshit. Just be honest about where you're at because somebody is going to meet you where you're at. And don't do it from one of my mentors called it a sell from your heels kind of like, well, I mean, I'm new to this and I could probably help. Like, there's a big difference between the, well, I'm just starting my copywriting business and I've done some emails for these people over here. What I think I could do for you is this, and I'd be willing to charge a reduced rate in exchange for a testimonial and some feedback, right? There's a totally different energy going into, I know I could figure this out over here versus I'm new. Will you approve me?
Right.
Maybe.
Right. Yeah. That it's all energy and frequencies, and it's important to match the frequency that you are, where you are with the frequency of the thing you want. I mean, that's how you're going to bring it to you a lot faster. And the universe doesn't really, in my experience, kind of let us off the hook, right? Because if it's sort of like, oh, well, when I make $500,000, then I'll feel better about myself, or then I will be validated, then that will prove to me that I'm good enough. It's like, no, the universe isn't going to let you off the hook that way. You got to know you're good enough first without any data points. Like, and that is how you're going to, it's like, you're not going to feel better about yourself when you make $500,000. Like when you do this, then it happens, right? Most people get it backwards.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I wrote about it in my book. It was like, there's no crossing the finish line into happy. And I don't mean don't celebrate your accomplishments. And if you hit a big goal, New York Times bestseller, spoke on my first stage in front of 10,000 people. Those are absolutely goals that should be celebrated. And then don't rest on your laurels, because that goes away after a while and you're on to the next thing.
Right.
One of my mentors talked about that too. He was like, I finally hit $1 million and I had like a little party, and then I went, well, shit, now what? I've been working toward this so hard for so long. I don't even know what to do with myself. And that's what it's like. Set the bar, cross it, set a new bar, on and on we go.
Yeah, once you normalize the thing you have. I mean, I know I sound a little woo in my speech sometimes, but we bring a science-backed approach. And so, there are more centers in the brain, there are more pleasure centers in the brain for wanting than there is for getting or having. And so we very quickly normalize. Once we get it, it's kind of, it's almost not as exciting anymore. It's like, I'm working so hard and I want it so bad. And then you get it and you're like, okay. Right?
That's nice.
What just happened? Right.
Next.
Right. So humans we're not designed to be happy. I mean, we're actually not supposed to be happy. We are, as humans, we are supposed to experience happiness, quickly normalize it, and then strive for more. That's what keeps us advancing.
I love that. I'm curious. Can you tell me more about like the wanting? If it's proprietary, no is always an acceptable answer. But I'm curious. I want to know more about that like wanting center of the brain.
Well, I think Joe Dispenza talks about this. Dr. Joe Dispenza. But we get so much juice out of being in that wanting, and there's what I call the loose tooth syndrome. Like, and when we're kids, you get a loose tooth and you flick it with your tongue because it kind of hurts, but it kind of feels good in a weird way, right?
Yeah.
It's Dr. Carolyn Elliott wrote a book called Existential Kink. And she talks about this, like when you don't have the thing you say you want, there's a part of you that is super getting off on not having it, and just own that, right? And so, and there is something so exquisite in the wanting and the pining and that just desperation, right? And it does tend to fall flat when we get the thing, and so that's just how humans are wired.
I can see that. Like there is a certain magic in being in a group with people and just talking about those big dreams, even when part of you is like, I don't know if I could do that, but like, this is the big goal I have. This is the vision. This is what's going to happen. Can't you just taste it? Have you actually started toward that? No? Okay.
Well, and that's a dangerous thing, right? And, people used to say, talk about your goals or whatever, because that makes you accountable to them. But the science is polar opposite to that, is diametric. Because what happens is the brain doesn't know the difference between fantasy and reality. It only knows what you're telling it. So the more you talk about your goals, the more your brain is kind of, getting off on the talking about. You're literally getting dopamine hits. Okay, that's dopamine is a chemical in the brain. It hits the pleasure centers. It's if it were a street drug, it would be cocaine. Okay, so you talk about your goals and you get so excited about talking about it, you get all your dopamine hits from that, instead of getting your dopamine hits from getting it done. And so what I say quite simply is the talkers rarely do and the doers rarely talk. Because they're getting all their dopamine and their juice from getting it done, not talking about what they're going to do. And this
Yes.
is why they say just keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you're on a mission, keep your mouth shut.
Oh man. But how does that work for those of us that are verbal processors and need to talk out our shit?
I think if you can do it with some level of neutrality, if it's data points, if it's strategy, if it's okay, here's what I need to do. This is okay. Like if it's process oriented, I think you're fine. But if you're getting all excited about it, you're teetering on a dangerous edge because you're losing kind of the juice that's going to launch you into getting it to making that happen.
Mm. Yes. Okay. That's a really good distinction. And I think for me puts into clarity why so many people I've worked with have had this struggle to actually get into action. They're so excited by the idea of it and the planning for it that like they don't even actually need to go do the thing and they're scared to do the thing. They'd rather just stay in the fantasy.
Yeah, it's because the fantasy is great, right? And I see this a lot in kind of my woo friends, because they'll get all excited about this. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I'm going to build a retreat center. I'm going to do a wellness center and all these things. And I watch them get all excited about talking about it. But when they sit down to actually do something, they realize that this is a massive undertaking and whatever. And they're like, this doesn't feel good. The actual doing this, I'm scared. I have imposter syndrome. I don't even know if I can do it. This isn't fun. It doesn't feel good. I'm going to go back to talking about it because that feels good, right? Because most humans in my experience, they don't seek happiness. They seek pleasure. And that's not the same thing.
That is an excellent distinction. I really love that. I had an interesting encounter with that with a high level marketer that I know. I remember talking to him about planning his launch, and it was a big, risky new thing. Like he was moving into uncharted territory, pitching a new angle as to why this marketing thing he was teaching was going to be the next new thing, right? And he commented offhand one night, like, I just really hope I don't lose the house. Like, I feel like I'm putting the mortgage in danger and like the company's going to go under. And I panicked. Like, that was my first time. I'm running the team. I'm going to him going, oh my gosh, like now I feel a whole lot of pressure. Is there something in the marketing that's not working that's triggering you? And he goes, I'm sorry, I should have warned you that I have dark humor. The mortgage is paid off and the business has plenty of reserves, but there's never been a time that I go into a launch like this that I feel like I'm okay. I know what I'm talking about. And that helped me kind of recalibrates how I think through these things. I don't feel okay. I feel scared. I'm going to do the thing anyway, because this feels good.
Right. Well, and fear is a good thing, actually. People tend to shy away from the experiences that they don't like, but fear is necessary when we're really going after something. People will say, oh yeah, I'm going to follow our fearless leader. And I say, I will never follow a fearless leader. That person is going to get us sunk.
Yes.
Because fear is a focusing mechanism. There's a chemical in the brain called norepinephrine. Sometimes we call it noradrenaline, but it's the focusing chemical. It makes you pay attention to fewer things, kind of lowers the cognitive load, right, if you will. And when you have a certain amount of fear, it's designed so that you're paying attention, right? Now, if you have too much fear, it's going to be paralyzing. But the right amount of fear is necessary when you're going after something.
Oh, I absolutely agree. All right, cool. Abrupt segue. Let's see if you can follow my line of thinking.
I'm gonna do this smooth, okay?
Yes, no, like this is ADHD brain in full effect. We talked about where you started. Where are you going?
That's a fantastic question for where we are right now on the map. Some interesting things happened. I had a very rough month of May.
You're not the only one. I had one, and I know several people who did.
Yeah, there was a lot going on, and a lot of people in my field had kind of a similar thing. My oldest friend, who I've known since we were 13 years old, he died that month, and
oh no,
and it really created quite a pause, an unexpected pause. Like it affected me much more deeply than I would have forecasted, and since then, it's kind of in the dance of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We were at 1 step back. I went, hang on a second. And I brought everything to a grinding hold for this organization. And also my previous operations manager left, my new one came on board. My father kind of got into his crazy a little bit. So I'm the one of the family that speaks dad. So that falls to me. I got shingles during the process. I mean, there was just stuff happening, right? So it was like, okay. And I was feeling very disconnected And this is really important to me, again, being the high sensation person, can't being bored. I was so disconnected from the big picture mission and what we're really doing here. And I really needed to refocus, because there's this triangle that needs to happen for me that guarantees my success. And that is when I connect my devotion to something, right? And this is very kind of, for me, this is very feminine in its orientation, right? It's that thing that you fall on your knees and just are in complete reverence of and devotion to. If I marry that to my commitment, which is for me very masculine, it's very heady, I'm choosing this, I'm doing this, this is happening, right? So when I marry my commitment to my devotion and I attach that to a vision, I don't know how to fail. And so it was like, my commitment is there, but where's my devotion and what's the vision? And so it's been an interesting sort of recalibration for this organization. We had just got the new rebrand has been done. The website changed, like everything's changed. And so now I feel like, okay, now we're cooking with gas here, and I'm excited about where we're going. So yeah, we're in a bend reality, making seemingly impossible things happen for a lot of organizations and individuals, because I like that. I don't like being told no. I don't like being told what can't be done.
I am exactly the same way. And it's so funny, like how I grew up with so much fear. I actually wrote about this at a retreat last week. Like, we're recording this in June. This is going to air in July. But I wrote about, like, it's so funny how some of the most fearless looking people among me, around me, have a whole lot of fear, but they just have decided to do the damn thing anyway. And man, I loved that. It was out in the backwoods of Kentucky. It was disconnected. And I feel like everybody should have a sabbatical option to just like, I know that the economy isn't set up that way in a lot of jobs, and there's a lot of people struggling right now. But if I had my druthers, I would lift everybody up to the level where they could regularly take that time off and just recalibrate, like you said.
Yeah, you can advocate for all the reasons you can't do it, but there's a quote, and I wish I could remember the source, but, if you advocate for your limitations, you get to keep them.
Oh, wow. I'm just going to let that hang there for a second.
Because like I said, don't tell me what can't be done. I have a lifetime filled with shit that I had no business being able to pull off. And I did every single one of them. I mean, I live in Southern California, like in LA on the west side. I mean, this is a town where people pay $24 for avocado toast. Don't tell me that your crazy idea can't happen, because ain't nothing crazier than that. We do it every day.
Yeah. Oh gosh. It reminds me of one of my in-house jobs. I was working on a signage package, and one of the sign guys comes over and stands behind me in my cube, and he sees me at my standing desk staring at the blinking cursor of doom on my blank page. And he just says, wait, is that how the signs get, like, you actually have to write it in a Word document? And I was like, yeah, it comes from my brain. I make this real from what you asked me to do. And it just, like, that story popped into my head when you said, like, these things that I create. That's what I love about entrepreneurship. You have an idea and you bring it out of the ether, wherever the hell that idea comes from, into reality. Isn't that magic?
Well, and that's exactly why this organization exists. Like, I'm not in service to people. Like, people think it's so great. You're so, you help people. I'm like, I'm not really into people all that much, to be honest with you.
Keeping it real on Permission to Kick Ass.
I love persons, but people.
I agree.
But the way I see it is there's something in the universe, whatever, call it your soul, like that wants to be experienced through you, as you, and you as your persona, your ego construct, are in its way. I'm in service to the thing that's trying to come through our clients. I'm not really in service to the client. I'm in service to the thing that's trying to come through them. Now, this benefits the client in immeasurable ways. They get to live the life of their dreams. They get to own the businesses of their dreams. They get to accomplish incredible things. And I don't really do it for them. I do it because the thing itself is true. Like, the way I see it, whether it's a company or a team within a company or an individual, whatever they're trying to do is like this incredible piece of sheet music that's never been played before in the history of humankind. And that organization or team or individual is the perfect instrument to play that music. My job is to make sure that instrument's in tune so that it can actually happen.
Oh, that's awesome. And how do you do that? Like, I love these metaphors, and now I'm trying to figure out how that actually happens. And again, if that's secret sauce, you don't have to share, but
no, I'll tell you anything. It's I mean, it's a function of getting your psychology, your physiology, and your energy all working for you instead of against you. So like, I'm going to physiologically change the way somebody's brain is operating. We're going to change their belief system on what they think is what they think is real and possible. I'll go into an organization, they want to grow their business or something like that. I tell them, do not bring me your market trends, your sales history, your KPIs, or all that. I don't want to see that shit, because it's completely going to fuck up what I think is possible because of the Bannister principle. Roger Bannister was, in the early to mid 1900s, the world was obsessed with the idea of watching a human being run a mile in under 4 minutes. Nobody had ever done it before. And people tried it for decades. And finally, May of 1954, this guy, Roger Bannister, runs a sub 4 minute mile. And after decades of people trying to make this happen, his record lasted 46 days. Because the moment he crossed the line, collective consciousness changed. We believed it was true. And once you believe it, you can see it. They say seeing is believing. That's bullshit. Believing is seeing. You will create the reality of your understanding.
I love that.
And so if I can change your understanding of reality, I will bend your universe.
And isn't that what we do in having these businesses and serving the people and creating these big visions? Change reality. That gives me goosebumps.
I have a client right now, and she's been good enough to even talk about it on our podcast. And but we started working with her because she wanted, business performance improvement kind of stuff. But fast forward, she was married to a clinical narcissist for like 26 years. We got her divorced. We got the house in the divorce. We got the house refinanced. We got her off of her anti-anxiety and anti-depression medication. She dropped 45 pounds. She moved 13 times through this process. We more than doubled her business. This took slightly over a year. I think it was 14 months. She's a different person living in a different reality, and it took us a year.
Oh, man. And does it start with that vision, or does it start with the steps?
It starts with disrupting the unconscious cycles that are running in your brain. That's of psychology, of neurophysiology. I'm going to create what I like to call hiccups in your brain patterns. And it's in those hiccups where the consciousness comes in, where like alternate ideas and whatever. And I'll use any number of modalities. We have a huge warehouse of tools, so to speak. But if I can change one word in a sentence and produce a different experience in your feeling state, and just even sitting here having this conversation, I can create a different experience by changing one word in a sentence. And that's going to create hiccups in your patterns.
Oh, I love that. Well, like I said, I have 5 million more questions I want to ask, but I'm going to keep this one. That feels like such a great way to wrap this up. Please tell us more where we can learn about working with you, about your business. Lay it on me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we set up a landing page for you and your listeners. It's chrismking.com/permission to kick ass.
Awesome. I'm going to make sure that there's a clickable link in the show notes. I have a feeling I'm going to get so much love from this episode. I will make sure to forward you every single one.
Oh, thank you. Well, getting me to talk is easy. Getting me to shut up is the challenge. That's because I love this stuff. I give away a lot of work because I can't shut up. It's just too much fun.
I am absolutely the same way. That's probably why we vibe so well. But thank you so much again. I really enjoyed this.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
That's all for now. If you want to keep that kick-ass energy high, please take a minute to share this episode with someone that might need a high-octane dose of "you can do it." Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the Permission to Kick-Ass podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you stream your podcasts. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and I'm here rooting for you. Thanks for listening, and let's go kick some ass.